talking about actually taking the checklist into the operating room. So I'm going to assume that you've gotten together an implementation team, that you have modified the checklist, and you've at least read it out loud amongst friends to make sure that it feels okay and that the words sound okay. That's the tabletop simulation part, so that you've done that, so that you know most of the bugs have been worked out. And now comes the time when you want to put your checklist to its first real test. Now the first principle here is test small. And that principle works for anything that you're trying to improve in your hospital. Whatever great idea you come up with, always test it. And whenever you test something, always test it amongst friends and test it small. And there's some really good reasons for that. Probably the biggest one being, if you test something and it doesn't work out well, you've made a little mistake. If you come up with something, even if you think it's great, without trying it out, and you just roll it out across an operating room or an institution or whatever, if there's anything wrong with it, you have now made a big mistake, not a little mistake. And what you'll see in healthcare is our repeated tendency to do the big bang, to cook up some idea in isolation and then go do it. And I'm sure, like me, you can reflect back on your career and think of many things that you've been exposed to over your course of practice that have been like that, where somebody's good idea all of a sudden becomes policy and everybody's expected to do it and nobody ever tried it out. And then there are a bazillion problems. So this whole idea of testing small on one case, one day, one surgeon, one OR team, testing small like that to see if it works before you start to test some more is a much easier, more effective, and safer way for everybody to get ultimately to using a checklist. So, taking it into the operating room. Now, one of the things that comes up in the very beginning of this kind of work nearly always is, well, how do we physically take it in to the OR? And you'll see on the left-hand side panel there, it says right now. And you'll see in the red circles there copies of the checklist that we were testing that day. And we actually were testing the checklist in a simulator. So the shots that you see there on both sides actually were taken in the simulator at the Brigham and Women's Hospital. It looks like a real OR, but nothing in it is really real. And you can see when we went to test that the nurse, that's actually one of our friends from Children's, Beth Norton, standing there with her copy of the checklist, and that's me standing there looking at the one that's taped to the IV pole with my copy of the checklist. So the idea in the small-scale testing is don't commit yourself to the price of putting it on a poster when you're still in the testing phase. Commit yourself to printing it out of a printer and taking a few copies into the operating room. So you can have the circulator hold the checklist up in front of the clinicians that are standing on the field so that they can read their parts aloud, and that then gives you the flexibility to make notes on your checklist if you want, take them to your next meeting, tweak it, and then make a new copy to bring back to the operating room the next time you decide to test it. So have multiple copies of the checklist in the operating room so people can see them and work off them, so that you can make notes and maybe make changes on them as you actually use them, but don't commit yourself to something big. And then eventually, and here you can see us basically reenacting the performance of the South Carolina checklist, which is posted on the wall in the simulator there, of what you're moving towards, which is a hopefully some kind of a large display of the checklist that's more permanent as you go to introduce it to other rooms in the operating room. So eventually, you can move to a poster. You can move to an electronic version, as we know some hospitals can do, or you can stay on paper forever, if that's the best way to actually do it in your operating room. But the idea, and what you hear me pushing here, is stay flexible. Don't commit yourself to anything until you're ready to commit yourself. So in this testing phase, okay, you modified, you tested outside, now you're going to go test inside. Stay flexible, don't commit yourself, so you feel like you can't change when you need to.